You can't see what I'm doing. I know that, because I didn't want the camera to be so far from me, and I'm making brownie bites. So this is basically, I wish I could describe this to you in greater detail, because I did not record the beginning, but I'll show you the ending of it. I basically took, it's semi-homemade, and you could definitely do this straight up homemade from scratch. But basically I took some Betty Crocker box cake. This cake happened to be devil's food flavor. Bake it according to the directions, let it cool, and then this is gonna look really strange. Then you mix it up with about a half of a tub of whipped frosting. That's my fingers digging in here. And then when you mix it up, looks like this. Then you take little sections of this, form it into a ball, like so, like that, in the words of Tabitha Brown. And then you're gonna pop these in the freezer for about 30 minutes before you dip them in chocolate. And then you have brownie bites. Now, of course, you can put a popsicle stick in them, and you could end up with, I guess, cake pops, technically. We call them brownie bites because the way this recipe originated for my family in particular was because my daughter was trying to make brownies for a bake sale at her school. And we made the brownies. She had to go to bed, so I put the brownies in the oven. And the brownies, they weren't burned, but the texture just wasn't right. There was something that we just didn't do right with the recipe. So they crumbled, and I couldn't make them edible. So I had the bright idea of, why don't we make brownie bites? And I did the recipe, and it turned out to be like the biggest seller at the bake sale. And now it's the thing that my family is known for from a sweets perspective. So I did this starting with box cake mix. It doesn't have, mine was Betty Crocker. You don't have to use Betty Crocker. You can use whatever you like, Duncan Hines or whatever. You can also make a cake from scratch and, you know, do it that way and actually make the frosting from scratch and make brownie bites that way. But I didn't have time for all that today. I'm in the middle of stuff. I don't normally do this kind of thing in a work dress, but here we are. I just got off a work call, and as it turns out, the students are gonna be looking for it tomorrow. I told my son's teacher that I would do these for a designated pizza day that the kids won. And I just found out, she emailed me this morning and she's like, oh yeah, the pizza day is tomorrow. Okay, ma'am, that is fine. You were an excellent teacher. My son is doing well in your class. The least I can do is make you all the dessert that you all have been asking me for as a class for the past 3 months. So here we are. It's about 5 minutes until 2. I do still have some work stuff to do, but I am getting this done because it needs to get done. Now, I just released a video. If you haven't watched it, the video was about postpartum depression, and it was my postpartum depression story. And I gave a bunch of resources. And first of all, thank you all for those of you who watched it. If you didn't, go back and catch it. I think it'll be very helpful and fruitful for you. Thank you for those of you who are joining. I should have said that at the very beginning. Thank you for taking time to click on this video and to watch it. I'm gonna make this one short. What I'm doing here is following up on that postpartum depression story, and to let you know, well, how is she doing now? You know, I told you in the story about how I kind of, the pre and the during postpartum. I didn't really get into the post of my postpartum journey. And I will have to say that, you know, it's an evolution. And if you've ever dealt with postpartum depression before, you know that there's no definite end. The only definite start that you can think of is when the baby is born. That is a specific moment in time. When it ends, it's hard to say. I think if you were to ask a doctor clinically, when does a postpartum period end? My guess is they'd say 6 months. But postpartum depression, for some people, may not be diagnosed until 6 months. So, you know, when do you kind of stop being postpartum depressed? For me, I think once I got into a rhythm with my family and with my kids and with my work, you know, does it get easier? No, it doesn't get easier. It just gets different. It's just like for those who have kids that are older, like teenagers, is parenting a teenager harder than, you know, looking at someone with a newborn for the first time? Some might argue yes. I argue that it's not. It's just different. You know, with a newborn, you're dealing with all the logistics. Are they fed? Are they clean? Are they loved? Are they satiated? Did they have all their shots? Did they go to the doctor's office? Did they have an earache? All those sort of logistical things. With teenagers, and I say this as a mother of a tween, so I'm not really into the teen years yet, but I can see how it's becoming much more strategic. Meaning, how do you deal with, someone who offers you drugs? How do you deal with a little boy who won't keep his hands to himself? How do you deal with a friend who is about to harm themselves, or a friend that's about to do something that you don't necessarily agree with, but you don't want to stop being their friend, but you want to help them because it's not healthy for them, or whatever the case. Like, those are things that are more challenging to deal with as a parent, because you are basically sending your child off into the ether, as it feels, hoping that they have been equipped with the knowledge that you want them to have to be able to handle those situations. That's a much more strategic type of parenting. So it doesn't get easier necessarily. It just gets different. Is it worth it? Yes. I highly recommend parenthood if you're a person who wants to be a parent, who does not have kids, and who is seeking parenthood. Is it hard? Yes, but I do recommend it. Nevertheless, my postpartum journey, I don't know when my postpartum depression ended per se, but I do know when I evolved. And the evolution took a number of steps for me. It took me, one, figuring out what I needed as a mother to be able to survive and to be healthy and to be safe and to be sane. For me, during my postpartum period, it required medication. It required, to a lesser extent, therapy. I didn't really start getting into therapy. I started going to a therapist, but honestly, it was too expensive at the time. I couldn't go to the therapist as often as I wanted to, so I went when I could. And that was great for me. It also involved understanding what I needed help for and when I needed help. I mentioned in the last video about my postpartum depression story that I was talking about getting a night nurse. I think I talked about it. Nevertheless, with my first child, I didn't have a night nurse. I thought that it was crazy. I thought that, who doesn't take care of their kid overnight? What bougie person has a night nurse? For the second kid, I was like, look, I will give up all the luxuries in my life in order to have a night nurse, because those hours of sleep that you get, that someone gives you, is priceless. And from that experience, I learned, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to outsource some stuff in order to be sane in this life called parenthood. And so for me, figuring out my rhythm at work, what my new workday looked like, when it started, when it ended, what to do when you get calls from the daycare or from, the kid's school in the middle of the day and you have to leave work or deal with something like that. What does it mean when the kid has a doctor's appointment, dentist appointment, practices, things like that? When I got into my rhythm, that's kind of when postpartum started to calm down for me. And also, that level of depression went into remission. One thing that I mentioned in the last video was that my postpartum depression, yes, it started with, the catalyst was, the baby being born and feeling overwhelmed and not knowing what to do with myself or what to do with this new beautiful child that I've been granted care and custody over. But it brought up stuff that I did not realize that I had not emotionally healed from, that had nothing to do with the baby or becoming a parent. It brought up stuff that I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I was still mourning the fact that I didn't, decided not to go to medical school. I didn't know that I was still mourning, the heartbreak that I felt, long before I even met my husband. Like, why am I still dealing with that emotionally? Because I didn't deal with it then. So postpartum brought up all those emotions and feelings, which is the craziest thing, because it's like, when I think about that heartbreak, I'm like, if I saw that silly boy on the street today, like, I wouldn't even think twice about him, because, a cis leveled up, relatively speaking, for sure. But it's not the person per se that I was thinking about. It was the emotion from that situation that I felt. I want to be clear about that. I'm not pining after some knucklehead boy from, 1943. Nevertheless, my postpartum started to bring up all those emotions and feelings that I thought that I had dealt with, but apparently I hadn't. And so medication helped to kind of clear the cloud of pain and emotion so that I could deal with the reality of what I was going through. Therapy is what helped me kind of address the feelings that I was feeling and actually, get to the root of it and yank the root out. Side note, I bet you wonder why I'm wearing gloves. in part, yes, it's because I'm making these for a bunch of my son's school friends, but also I hate getting goo underneath my fingernails. And these are clutch. Gloves are part of my normal grocery shopping list. And so I'm always wearing gloves when I cook stuff for other people. And I wear gloves when I am making any sort of meat. So like if I'm, washing chicken, raw chicken, or dealing with raw bacon, or dealing with any kind of raw meat, I always wear gloves. And that actually, okay, side note, but I'm coming back, I promise. That actually was a survival technique. When I was living with the kids, my husband was training in Toronto at the time. I was living with the kids by myself in Atlanta. And anytime I would cook chicken, I would really batch cook because it was me and the toddler and the 3-year-old. And I would batch cook like a family pack of drumsticks, pop those things in the freezer, and I had like go-to dinners quickly because my kids love chicken drumsticks. But what I found was I can't effectively parent the toddler who's about to knock over the lamp, and I'm sitting here washing chicken, but I can't touch them and pick them up or whatever. But what I can do is while I'm washing and dealing with the raw meat, if the kid needs me immediately, I can rip the gloves off and go deal with the kid. So anyway, I'm back to postpartum. The part that was able to get me to recovery was therapy. And therapy is not cheap, I agree. Am I still in therapy? Yes, I still am in therapy because I recognize that therapy actually helps me get through life and helps me think through and process things in a way that I wouldn't ordinarily think through and process them. I strongly believe in therapy. I think everybody should have a therapist, even if you don't think you need a therapist. I'll list some resources. BetterHelp.com is a great resource. I've actually used BetterHelp before, and I found a wonderful woman there that I worked with. But it was through therapy that I figured out what my triggers are, and I figured out what sanity looks like for me. It's when I figured out that, my love language is acts of service. It's when I figured out, the root of why I was so upset about not going to medical school and how to deal with it. And importantly, how it shows up in my life now, even though I have achieved career success and all those things. I'm happily married, 2 beautiful, healthy kids. Why am I still dealing with that foolishness? Okay, it's because when certain things happen in my life, it takes me back emotionally to that time. And how do I deal with that time in order to move forward in a way that's productive? So, needless to say, or all this to say, there isn't a specific end date for postpartum depression. One might say that it ends when, the physical, biological postpartum period ends for a woman after she's had the baby. But I think for me, the end date for postpartum was when I got a rhythm. And to be clear, the rhythm changes at all times. You know how if you've had a baby, then you can finally get that kid sleeping through the night. All is well in the world. That kid gets a cough or gets a sneeze or gets a runny nose, throws everything off. And it is the worst, most annoying thing ever. So rhythm is relative. But when I felt like I finally had a handle on things, generally speaking, that's when the postpartum started to subside. And then I was just dealing with, how do I figure out and live a life that is happy, that is full of the things that bring me joy, and that is full of things that add value to other people, where I'm sharing my internal gifts with the rest of the world. And where my kids feel loved and supported. When I figured out if I'm feeling a certain kind of way, or when I'm overwhelmed, or when I have a challenge, knowing where to go, what resources to tap into for help and assistance. That's when postpartum subsided for me. And that means that I would recommend to you, if you're dealing with postpartum, or if you have dealt with postpartum, maybe your kids are older and you're still kind of dealing with that sense of overwhelm, that sense of, I'm not going to make it, this motherhood thing is ghetto and this just ain't gonna work. Maybe you're still dealing with that. I recommend to take some time, find a therapist if you can. If you can't find a therapist, I will put some, if you can't find a therapist, or if therapy is too expensive or not in the budget for you, I will add some resources to the screen to kind of help you consider other options and other alternatives. By the way, I'm done. Yay! You see how quick that was? And I have all these little brownie bites. I will freeze these, and then I will use, I'll get it, hold on. I picked this up at Walmart, but you can use, there's a Ghirardelli one that's really good as well. Basically, you melt this down, you dip your pretzels, strawberries, whatever into it, and then this hardens as it cools, so you end up with this beautifully, deliciously chocolate treat. Nevertheless, I'll put some resources on the screen to help with that. In terms of finding a therapist or finding something that's affordable for you, if it's group therapy, by all means, go for group therapy. If you are religious, or if you attend church or attend a religious or are part of a religious organization, seek out women's groups that might be helpful and supportive to you, moms groups. There are other groups like MOPS, MOPS, which is Mothers of Preschool Children. I think that's what it stands for. There's Mocha Moms. There are all these different moms groups, and that's of course referring to people with smaller kids. For us older people with middle-aged kids, you know, there are organizations that you can join. Certainly if you have a sorority that you're a part of, or if you're part of Junior League. The point is, seek out other women who are mothers and have conversations with them. Are they a licensed clinical therapist? Absolutely they are not, and you should not treat them as such. However, sometimes just having those conversations and realizing you're not alone is the most fantastic part of the process. And I think what I'm going to do is actually put out some questions. Perhaps it's part of a conversation that you and your girlfriend or other friends that you have around you, a question and answer, a question guide, where you can kind of dig into some of these meaningful conversations that can help you cope and deal with the things that you're feeling relative to postpartum, or relative to postpartum, I guess is what you would call it, when you've, you know, experienced postpartum and you're beyond, or even if you're just dealing with motherhood in general. I feel like there are deep questions and conversations that as women, we don't have often enough. So I'll put that question guide out for you. But you know, I can't recommend therapy enough. I can't. And I'm blessed and thankful that I've been able to afford it. Like I said, I still go to therapy. I'm not in therapy year round. I do kind of go on and off. If I feel like I need it, great, then I'm in it for a period of time. And then when I feel like I've resolved the issue, then I'm out of therapy. But I kind of know myself well enough to know my triggers, and well enough to know, wait a minute, I need to give so-and-so a call again because we need to start having these conversations because I have this mental or emotional or relational block or issue that I can't quite resolve on my own, or I have this feeling or sensation that continues to come up. I keep feeling very overwhelmed, or I keep feeling like I'm not good enough, or like the work that I'm doing is not, or like I'm a terrible mother, or like I'm a terrible wife or something like that, and I can't quite shake the feeling no matter what I do. You know, it's that kind of stuff where that comes into play. And that really is an offshoot, at least for me it is, an offshoot of postpartum. So I'm going to put some resources up for you. I hope this helps. Comment down below, okay? I don't want you to tell me if you've had postpartum depression or if you know somebody, unless you just want to share that information. But I am curious to know, how often do you get together with girlfriends and or friends, people that you know who can nurture you and nourish you, and you can nourish them as well? People you can have deep conversations with. You know, sometimes it's only by text, sometimes it's by phone call. It depends. Also, if you have resources or you're aware of resources that can help other people when it comes to dealing with mental health issues, therapy, things in that space, leave that down below as well. I want this to be a community where we can actually help each other and provide value and add value to one another. So in any case, that's all I have. I am at 2:12, almost 2:15. My kid's gonna be home in 30 minutes. I have some more emails I need to send, so I'm gonna run upstairs, but not before I put my, I don't know how I'm gonna fit this thing in the freezer. I'm always perplexed when people say, oh, just pop this massive thing in the freezer for 30 minutes. Yay. I think I actually may roll this into the ball of the brownies, roll this back into the bag the brownies were in, and put that in the freezer, because that, yeah, no, I ain't got no room in there. Thank you for joining. Please subscribe, please share, please like. I'm growing this YouTube one view at a time, and I thank you for your view. I appreciate you. Check me out at The Continuity Co. on Instagram. And if you have any questions or content ideas to share with me relative to motherhood management, then let me know. I am happy to be here for you, okay? Have a wonderful, beautiful day. Be well. Take care.